Be advised that this show is not for the faint of heart, easily offended, or children of any age. The opinions and information expressed in this podcast are intended for entertainment purposes only. Deviant Robot provides no guarantee as to the accuracy, completeness, currentness, or validity of this content. Like many things in life, don't take it too seriously and stop using if irritation develops.
God, really? Cat immediately? God damn. That is a fantastic cat, David. What is
That's
the cat's
Morla.
name? Morla. As in fighter?
You remember Neverending Story?
Oh, yeah.
The big turtle that sneezed all the time?
I do not remember the name of the character, but oh my gracious. That is a gorgeous looking cat. That is a gorgeous looking cat.
The turtle in the swamp of infinite sadness, I think it's what it's called. Where the horse dies.
I remember the swamp and the horse dying. I remember that being deeply upsetting when I was a kid. Yes, absolutely remember that bit.
Anyway, look it up later.
I will. No, Neverending Story is a classic. I haven't seen it in a very long time. You totally disrupted the show with tactical deployment of cat. That cat cannot be happy in this weather. Like, oh my God, it's just made of fluff. How is it? Oh, there we go. So
that's my producer.
We had like a little running order of things that we were going to talk about. Let's just forget that. Let's just put David's camera on the. We just think of the views. I mean, that is a fantastic cat. May gracious. Right, awesome. Well, that's thoroughly scuppered everything. So, hello, my name's William. I'm your host today, as always, and I am joined today by Noah, which is no, that way. Hey Noah, you want to say hello?
Hey guys, how are you?
Wave. Good. I'm David from Sound Epistemology. You don't have a channel, Noah, do you?
Oh no,
you haven't started anything. Excellent, fantastic.
You know, I spent the last month recording a coaching course with the company I work for, and so I was with my boss, 7 days a week, whatever, shooting this footage, and I've got like 40 hours of footage to edit, but we're gonna sell it, so it's not like it's as if I'm making it, but it's gonna be for sale, right?
Nothing will make you not want to do something as a hobby. Like doing it for work. That will totally suck it out of you for sure. Fantastic. Well, hello everybody. I hope everybody's got that fabulous and fantastic Friday feeling going on already today. So we've got like a whole bunch of things to talk about today, but one of the things that I wanted to just open up with is just talking about the Roe v. Wade decision. And just to let everybody know, we're not going to be talking about this for a great deal of time. Because frankly, I think there's probably going to be better people better able to give commentary on it. But I did want to say a few things because I think it's an interesting time, not just about the and so sorry, I'm going to monologue for like literally a couple of minutes here, and that's no, I understand you guys are all used to me monologuing. That's just a regular day, but I'm actually calling out the fact that I'm going to do it, so that's how bad it's going to be. But yeah, I was kind of thinking about the Roe v. Wade thing because, like, frankly, it's kind of an alarming thing, right? And I was trying to think about why it's alarming to me as somebody who doesn't even live in that country, but it definitely feels like, when these things keep happening, we get these kinds of decisions coming down or hearing about them echoing around the world. Like it's kind of scary. And I think it's just because these issues are like fundamentally difficult and extraordinarily divisive. It's really easy to understand why when you discover these things are happening in the world, that you can recognize that you don't share the moral intuitions of your fellow country members, right? You suddenly realize that these people believe something fundamentally different to you. But it's not just people in your country believe crazy thing or strangely directly opposing thing. It's also your neighbors and probably even also your families. And it can be really, really scary to suddenly realize that the people around you don't share your moral values and your intuitions about these things. This is kind of weird, I think, in America with the Supreme Court thing, because it's not a particularly popular opinion. I think if there was a national vote on it, I don't think people would have voted to abandon Roe v. Wade. But of course, it's sadly, that's not how it works. So this is kind of a bit strange, but that feeling that the people around you who are carrying signs in direct oppositions to the signs that you're carrying definitely can make the sort of world feel like it's a scary place, and it can make you fearful. And I think fear is the scary part, because when people are scared, they also tend to get angry, and anger basically is, whilst understandable, with anger comes a breakdown in communication. And so it feels like when the topic is divisive, the communication immediately becomes less effective. And the divisions of our society are not going to be eroded by anger. They're not going to be eroded by rallying cries of a charismatic leader or a mob. The battlefield of ideas is not actually a place, and it doesn't reward aggression. It's understandable why people are angry, but it's not really a great way to solve ideological problems of people's views and perspectives. It's not a battlefield that's real, but it does exist, and it exists at the dinner tables of people's homes. It exists in bars and restaurants, and it exists in workplaces. It exists wherever people are, and that battlefield is whenever people talk. And so how you talk about these things really matters. And most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about how to be an effective communicator. We don't tend to practice talking to each other. And we sort of assume that we're okay at it. But when it really matters and we really realize that we don't have the tools to effectively communicate with those people around us, it can feel like conversation is impossible, which leads to more fear and more anger and more frustration. So the thing that I want people to just think about, and the whole point really of this channel and the Street Epistemology community, is the fact that effective communication can be learned. You can get better at it. You can actually learn to inspire reflection in those people that you are trying to talk to, and learn not just to pursue victory, like not to win the conversation or defeat your enemy, but to make progress. And that progress exists in them learning to notice something about the way they see the world and reflect on it. You can learn to encourage those that you're talking to see the world differently and perhaps change the way that they choose to act as a result. Learning to have better conversations leads to real and genuine reflection. And real and genuine reflection leads to better ideas. And better ideas leads to a better world for everybody. So I really just think despite how scary this all feels right now, like the fact that there is a community around, this channel, around Street Epistemology, and there's a whole group of people out there right now that really value having good conversations, genuinely makes me feel less scared. And I think just trying to get out there and talk to people and have these conversations and learn to be more effective in having those conversations, I think is a great thing for everybody to do right now. So yeah, I just wanted to open with that. And that would lead me into the first topic, which is how do we have conversations about these really highly contentious issues? And how do we talk to people about these things? And how does SE change the game when it comes to addressing something that might be very divisive, where we feel not just that we disagree, but maybe we disagree to the extent that we just can't seem to want to exist in the same space as that conversation partner. So yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on that? I mean, David, you especially have probably gone out and had some interesting conversations. What's been the most contentious topics you've addressed, and how do you feel about these things?
Oh, well, I was going to kind of backpack on what you were talking about, as far as having better conversations and having that kind of idea of a battlefield, and addressing fear and anger. It kind of reminds me of this podcast that I listened to. It's probably been a couple of years now, off of David McCraney's "You Are Not So Smart" podcast, I believe it was from, and he had a group facilitator, communicator, expert guy named Misha Globerman, I believe, and he was kind of talking about this idea of over the past tens of thousands of years, the way that we've been resolving disputes is just by hitting people with sticks and rocks. And that's how we used to solve disputes until we figured out how to debate. And the problem with debate is that you're basically doing the same thing. You're hitting people with words. We've kind of moved on from hitting people with sticks and rocks to hitting people with words, but it's basically the same thing. It's a battle. My ideas versus your ideas, and right. I think that one thing that street epistemology can offer is that at least the beginning of that next evolutionary step that we need to take to solve disputes, beyond debate,
beyond seeing it as a conflict.
Right.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah, not so much trying to destroy the other person with objects or words, and just kind of taking that next step that we need to take to have a more productive world.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like the idea that sticks, like physical violence, sticks and stones, were the early forms of street epistemology. Was going out there and battering your opponent with a rock. I like the idea that, and I do get a sense, and we might touch on this again later, that maybe some members of the community might feel like that's where we need to get back to. But and I can sometimes recognize that impulse. I saw a comment about Russia and Ukraine not being about words, and I think, fair enough. Not all conflicts are about words, but I do think conversation can feel like conflict far too often, and because it feels like that, we feel like we're being attacked, especially if it's these really entrenched views that we hold that seem diametrically opposed to the views of our interlocutor. We can feel invalidated, attacked, challenged. We can start to be scared about the implications of what's being said. And when we do feel like that, we tend to be less generous in our interpretation, less open to the conversation, and start to become angry and actually just have this erosion of communication. So yeah, I really think that's a great metaphor. What are your thoughts, Noah?
Well, as David was speaking, I was thinking, this really is like a conflict in a battle. But thinking about it a little more, I do agree with what you're saying, David. Yeah, I mean, street epistemology is a neutral tool. It can be used for any to make any point, to try to convey any sort of thing. And the techniques within, obviously, there's a skeptical bias within the community, right? But at the very least, some of the tactics that are not, I don't want to use, I keep using these conflict terminology, but
yeah, it
things
stinks
like
in there, doesn't it?
deliberately avoiding, right, like the rapport building tools and deliberately avoiding incendiary, personal, ad hominem, remarks. Those are really unused weapons, not weapons. I'm sorry. Those are tools that don't get used enough, I should say. Right. I mean, if you had the same intuition I did when you first got exposed to street epistemology, and you see these videos of whatever, people in the street in real time recognizing that there are problematic beliefs, or their beliefs are problematic, or they're not consistent. That's something you don't see anywhere else. You don't see that in debates. You don't see that in an Oxford style debate. Intelligence Squared, if you've ever seen those, you'd ever see like one of the debaters change their minds in real time. Like, it's just such, it's the kind of thing that people say can't be done, but it can. And it can be done, especially with average sort of people, right? Like, you're not going to probably convince Jordan Peterson that metaphorical truth is baloney on a podcast, but imagine if you could. I mean, that would be pretty cool. But I think it's useful tools. We need to use them more.
Completely agree. I'd say that I don't think street epistemology is the only game in town when it comes to not seeing conversation as conflict. But I definitely think it's very focused on this idea, and it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily unique, but it's certainly a growing and enthusiastic proponent of not seeing conversations as conflict. And I think that one of the things is the moment you stop thinking about conversations as conflict, you change your goals in terms of what you're looking to achieve. And this idea, like foundationally, the idea that I need to destroy you, I need to win this, it becomes a zero-sum game, right? I win if you lose, and vice versa. The moment we have these ideas, which, like you mentioned debate, I mean, even the civil forms of these kinds of conversations are inherently about zero-sum games. Like, the debate is a zero-sum game. There's a winner and a loser. We can maybe sometimes argue about who that is, right? But like, that's how it's presented. And changing that dynamic and saying it's not a zero-sum game, right? I'm benefited just as much as you're benefited by us recognizing which ideas we hold might not be justified by our reasoning processes. Like that's something that should genuinely benefit everybody. And so taking the time to carefully go through and talk about what the person believes and why, and then taking the time to help them explore those ideas without there being a defined objective about them having to come to a certain conclusion by the end of the conversation, otherwise we all lose, right? That's just massive. And I really think I really wish people would take the time to learn these kinds of ideas. Even at a high level, I think it would be just great.
This win-lose kind of idea, it's kind of weird to think about with debate too, because the winner of a debate doesn't learn anything, right?
Right.
Because they had the correct idea, obviously, right? That's why they won.
Just lost the debate because the debate was unfair.
or the person that loses, the loser of the debate, gains knowledge, right? So who's actually winning here? It's like the loser of the debate gains the knowledge. So it's kind of weird to think about the winner and the loser of a debate, where who's really gaining. And back to the fear part, there's this idea of the same thing that happens in your brain when you see a predator in the bushes or whatever is the same thing that happens in your brain when your beliefs are challenged.
Yeah.
And so that idea of fear kind of comes up. And I think what SE tries to help is mitigate and reduce that part of whatever your brain is doing in that moment, so that you can open up and have your defenses not come up so easily.
Yeah, one thing I think is also interesting is the idea that the feeling like in order to have an effective conversation with somebody, you need to be able to empathize with why they might be holding this view. And in fact, you ideally need to not only empathize with it, but also help them discover why they hold this view. And I think a lot of people are actually fearful of exploring the rationalization process of, so you have an extreme neo-Nazi racist guy, right? Some people might be fearful. I kind of equate this sometimes to, you know, that feeling where you're in a very tall building or something, and you have this slight concern, not that you are going to slip, but that you might want to throw yourself off. Like you're slightly fearful of your own internal. That there's a beautiful French expression which I've completely forgotten for this, but the desire, it's the lust for the void, I think is the expression, but it's in French and it sounds much nicer. But the desire to sort of throw yourself off. It's your own. It's not trusting yourself, in other words, that I think makes you concerned. And I think we have a similar reaction when we explore ideas that we fundamentally disagree with or might scare us or might make us afraid, because we're frightened that by opening ourselves up to a position that we've decided is terrible and wrong, we might prove to be persuaded by being challenged or being argued with, and suddenly we might find that we might agree with their position. And so that empathy is immediately, there's a barrier for that empathy, because we're afraid to even begin to empathize with our conversation partner and see why they might have come to that view. But actually, empathy is a great way of discovering how you can bridge the gap between you and your conversation partner. And yet it's a road that I think many people feel is scary and preemptively closed.
You'll have to say it in French now.
I really don't know what it is in French. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, so to be fair, Raymond has taken a throw. So there we go. That's lust for the void. Except then he immediately followed it by I can't spell in French. So who knows what it actually spells?
Well, I was going to say whatever you said. I was going to say, yeah, that sounds way better.
That sounds great. Yeah. So just one real quick. Gina says that's actually how I feel. Not just about beliefs, but when I've learned to hold loosely, but things that I value. When I'm in a defensive state, I tend to find it hard to empathize. Exactly. Yes. It's just, and there's no cure all for this stuff, right? It's just it's just, I think especially if we're not confident about our own epistemologies, right? Like if we're not really sure why we believe what we believe, we might be much more afraid to have a conversation with somebody who we believe something that we've also decided is totally wrong. And so I think exploring our own beliefs or having other people like talk to us about our own beliefs is a really great way of building confidence in our own positions. And therefore maybe we're more willing to explore other people's, because we are more confident in why we believe what we believe. So in many ways, I think it doesn't really matter which side of the spectrum you're on here. Like it would definitely advantage everybody to have more people using these kinds of conversational tools and exploring everybody's beliefs and everybody having at least a better sense of their own epistemologies.
And it seems like some of these doors are best open from the inside. I can't help but wonder, if you have some highly influential community members within whatever the thought group that you're in, pick whatever it is, it would certainly be more effective for those leading intellects within that group to be the ones to try to explain, to hold their own community intellectually accountable for their beliefs. And, I think street epistemology right now most directly targets things like faith. And it's sort of like these two different groups with different views. And it would probably be more effective if the faith community did it themselves, right? So how could you promote that sort of behavior within a group that's not your own? Because that would certainly be more effective in getting those groups to try to unpack the reasons for why they believe what they believe, not coming from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the street epistemology community targets faith or street epistemology as the method or the approach to it, whatever it is. Like, I don't think it targets faith explicitly. I think it just more frequently encounters faith as an example of the position people believe in. I think look, I've spoken about this before, like Anthony and whose channel has come to define modern SE, right? He's in Texas, right? And he's standing out in the middle of Texas with a board and saying, "What do you believe?" Right? Is it that surprising that most of the time we encounter people that claim that what things that they believe, when they hear the word belief, that they equate that to their religious faith, and so that ends up having those kinds of conversations. But it's a real problem, I think, within the community and the optics of the community, that it feels that therefore it must be about that it's deliberately targeting that, where I would certainly suggest that it isn't. It just most frequently encounters that.
Yeah, claims seem to be geographic. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and faith hardly ever comes up in my conversations. Like, I don't even know if there's been any in real life ones that I've uploaded where I'll have to go back, but it hardly ever comes up. We hardly ever talk about faith or any particular religion. So yeah, I think it's geographic, but I kind of like what you were getting at there, Noah, where it almost sounded like you were saying, we need to be the empathy we want to see in the world, and understand that's really what it takes. It's hard to see empathy when you're angry.
Yeah. What's your argument here? Just says, on top of reliable epistemology, we need emotional awareness and control as well. And yeah, I think that touches on that exact thing. Like the moment we start to recognize that, we're angry or we're responding emotionally to an argument, we should also recognize that we're losing control of what we might want to have said in this moment, and that later we might reflect that we would have preferred to have. It's almost always a better thing to do to walk away from a conversation and come back to it when you're feeling like you're more in control, than to respond emotionally. Because somebody screaming at you, like has anybody in the history of ever been convinced by somebody screaming at them to change their view or to change their behavior? Like,
not as an adult.
But it's an incredibly low hit rate, I'd imagine, on that method, right? And so, but it feels good to us to do that, right? Clearly, it feels cathartic to be able to just vent at this person, but venting doesn't change minds. And yeah, I definitely think yeah, you're right. Like, a lot of this comes down to recognizing your own internal state first. Like, you need to really think about like where you are emotionally and where you are epistemologically. Like, why do you think what you think before you go out and challenge other people? Like, like I said earlier, I think it's really important that we make sure that we are comfortable with our own, not just so that we can help other people learn how to be comfortable with theirs, but also so that we can openly explore other people's epistemologies without fear of the consequences. And I think that's not the fear of the consequences is not fear of having your mind changed. That's really important.
Yeah.
Like, the consequences you might be afraid of would be being persuaded to believe something that's dangerous for you. Like, I don't want to have somebody come along and do a Jedi mind trick on me, and suddenly I'm doing something that's dangerous and disruptive to me. And the way we get around that fear is being more confident in the reasons why I believe what I believe. And I think that hard work, but it's worthwhile, pays dividends.
Identity too. This idea of, our beliefs don't have to be our identity, and we have this tendency to attach our identity with our beliefs. I think it's important to remember that we might do that to our conversation partner too, and right. Try to avoid that. Like, we don't want to identify them with right. their beliefs either.
Yeah, nobody is one thing. I mean, you might consider some particular aspect of them the most important thing to you about them, right? But nobody is one thing. And I think if we define people as just purely this one belief, then it becomes very easy for us to feel a certain way towards them and dehumanize them, frankly. and equate them to their ideas.
Right.
When we equate ourselves to ideas, right, this is hugely beneficial for the ideas, but not very beneficial for us. I mean, the ideas genuinely benefit a lot by this, because you're going to fight tooth and nail now for this idea, because the destruction of the idea is going to feel like the destruction of your very own identity. This clearly makes a lot of sense for an idea, because it's like, great, now I've got a willing foot soldier that's going to fight no matter what. But of course, it's not so good for you. Fighting for equating ideas to identity is a great way for you to stop thinking about whether or not that idea is actually true or not. And I think that, Roe versus Wade, I think both people on either side of this argument will very much consider the idea that their identity is very much tied to the narrative on this particular issue. And that even for a moment contemplating that they might change sides in this argument if they're given good and persuasive information is just not available to them. They just can't understand how anybody could possibly do that. And that's a really scary thing. If you feel that about your idea, that you couldn't be persuaded out of it given good evidence and good information, yeah, that's a scary place, and you really ought to think about why that would be. And obviously all ideas that you have, right? and that's a great segue. Feeling true. That was I didn't intend that, but there's a segue right there. But before we embrace that segue, we will just ruin it by saying, does anybody have any other final thoughts on this? 'Cause it's a great topic, and I definitely think we'll come back to it. But yeah, so go ahead.
I think there's fear. There's fear on both sides. Recognizing that this whatever decisions people make, can be very fearful for the rest of us. And recognizing that a decision that goes another way can cause a lot of fear to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to recognize that other people see you the way you see them is a useful thought exercise for sure. Yeah. Any final thoughts from yourself, Noah?
Well, it seems like this fear thing, it is a reality, but it shouldn't be. Because if we want to model this openness, the less fear we can portray within ourselves, the better. Because if fear is going to be that thing that prevents somebody from potentially unpacking their beliefs fairly, then if both sides are fearful, it's less likely to probably land. So I'm just thinking about now, what is the relevance of fear in this case? I mean, at least personally, and I'll admit I haven't actually gone out into the street like David has, and had these conversations. I mean, I've had a conversation with friends, right? But I want my mind to be changed. I don't, when I'm looking for people to change my mind, right? Like, and I suppose that's just the way that I relate to myself and my identity. But I recognize that that's not how most people, want to live their lives, constantly looking for reasons to change what they believe. But I'm just thinking about that now. What is the relevance of fear in this case? So anyways, moving on.
Yeah, no, sorry. Sorry, my wife just came in. I was like startled. So yeah. I think, this comment's absolutely true. Fear is natural, but letting it control you isn't helpful, in my opinion. Yeah, it's absolutely natural. Sorry, guys, can you give me 1 second? Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, just recognizing it and identifying the fear can be a big step in not letting it control you. Yeah, surely.
or on microphone, recognizing, yes, your emotional state is really, definitely really important. I completely agree. So there's one other comment, from B here, but I've screwed up my thing. There we go. Sorry, I can't see this comment at all for some reason because my screen's got all screwed up. What if in a real conversation I provided you good evidence that you couldn't debunk the Earth is flat? Would you change your mind in real time on the street? No, and that's a really good point, because I don't think people ever really do change their minds in real time. Like I just don't think people. It doesn't work like that, which is another reason why the zero-sum game of the conflict narrative of conversation is really really disruptive, because there's never a victory. Like at most, you might see somebody want to give up the conversation, and you'll feel that that's some kind of victory. But for the most part, I think most people don't change their minds in the moment. They take away what you've said, and then they think about it, or they might reflect on it, or the next time they're asked about something that relates to it, it's confidence. And maybe in the next time somebody asks them about it, they might say they're not sure, or not express their view, in the same way, and that's the progress that you actually get. I very rarely has anybody ever gone checkmate atheism, and the atheist has given up and starts believing in God, like, or whatever the view is. It's irrelevant. Nobody changes their mind like that. And one of the things that's great about SE is that it values making progress over victory. And that's just this huge thing, right? It's just this huge thing because victory just doesn't work in conversation. Seeing it as a conflict is not an effective way to communicate. So yeah, I think if somebody presented me with flipping amazing, undeniable evidence for the flat Earth, I would seriously be interested in that. I would not change my mind in that moment, but I definitely, if I was sufficiently motivated, think about it, read about it more online, explore that idea. Like that's what I would do. Like I wouldn't suddenly become a flat earther. I would say, I hadn't thought about that before. That's really interesting. I will totally read up more about that and see if I would do. I'm not going to change my mind in that moment.
Yeah, there's this, I think, this important idea to remember about beliefs aren't necessarily like an on and off switch. It's more of a spectrum, and that's why we focus sometimes on this confidence scale when speaking with somebody about their beliefs, because that's really how it goes. It's more of a dimmer switch rather than the on-off switch, and seeing it more as lowering your confidence, raising your confidence based on the evidence, instead of it being 100% or 0 all the time.
Yeah, completely agree. I like this comment from Gigi, but I've totally just lost it in the melee of things. Here we go. Yeah, there's an aspect of, if I change my mind, what does it mean about me as a person? The moral dimension of, my side is good, their side is bad. And so, this, I think these kinds of divisive, partisan narratives, of course, exist. I think also people fear changing their minds. Like it's devalued as a virtue these days, right? I know Noah was a fan. I don't know if you were a fan, David, but I've certainly been a fan of Christopher Hitchens. And one of the things that I've always thought was quite interesting about Christopher Hitchens is that he changed his mind about Marxism. Like he very much flipped his script on that, and he talked about it, about that, he still feels the urge to go back to it and think about it, but he just had to give it up at some point. He said it didn't work for him. I've always been very I've always admired people for whom they have the ability to change their mind, that have the courage to do that. I think it's so hard. And I think in most discourse nowadays, like social media or even mainstream media, I think it's seen as flip-flopping, as being uncommitted and flimsy. And it's just totally not virtue. But actually, changing your mind, whichever direction you go, having the courage to take ownership of your ideas and change your mind if that's where the argument leads, I think it as a virtue. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, if you think of like politicians that change their minds,
they don't last.
They don't get elected. That's such a
they change the truth before they change their minds. That's what they would. Yeah. They change what the truth is.
Yeah, it's not a quality that people look for in a politician,
and it should be.
Yeah.
The ability for a politician to say, hey, I was wrong about this. Like, I thought this way. But of course, we sort of have given up on this idea. Politics is a great example of where these kinds of narratives become vilified and virtualized. I think you see a politician become successful because, they've always held the line. It's not, there's this slightly uncharitable, perhaps not, joke that's made about religious people and the Catholic Church specifically, and the idea is that it's easier to do well in the Catholic Church if you don't believe in God. The idea being that if you don't believe in God, all you have to do is worry about what the Catholic Church thinks. Whereas if you do believe in God, you'll have to worry about what God thinks as well as the Catholic Church. So that makes it more complicated for you. You might disagree with the Church's ruling on something. You might think God is telling you to do something different, but much easier if you just toe the party line and follow the sort of the Catholic Church narrative on everything. Now, I think that might, how well that applies to the Catholic Church, who can say, but it certainly works well in politics. We certainly see politicians definitely do better if they follow the party line rather than do their own thinking. Like you just don't see politicians do their own thinking, and actually, loyalty is praised above all.
I might push back on this with politicians specifically. And the reason being, while I do think it's a good human virtue to be open to changing your mind, depending on your political system, in a representative democracy like what we have in the United States, at least, and to an extent where you are, Will, if you vote for somebody because their view at the time of your voting represents what you believe, and then they change their mind, I think it would be okay to it would be right for you as the voter to be a little frustrated with that behavior because you were expecting them to represent your view, and now they're not. And so again, I think it's a good human virtue. I think with politicians specifically, that they're a special case. It's a special class where changing your mind might be a detriment.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I would sort of disagree. And the reason I would disagree is that, let's say political decision A, right, needs to be made. And I vote for my candidate because they are for position A. And I think position A sounds like a great idea, right? And they clearly do. Basis of that, they get into office, and now they're in a position to have access to all of the information. Now they're responsible for the decision A situation, right? And after taking the time to really honestly look at the information available to them, they recognize now that it's actually not a viable solution, right? And now they're saying, well, actually, I'm now against position A. I can totally understand that. You're right. I could feel betrayed by that. That makes sense. But I would mostly be betrayed. My assumption in the political sphere, right, would be that person has not changed their mind because they've now got access to more information. My view would be that somebody has paid them off or persuaded them or pushed them into a position where they literally have to now negate their promise, right? It's my suspicion of their motives. And usually we get, why did you change your view? And the answer is usually some weak source, pathetic, it's not convincing, essentially. Oh, I looked at the issues and just decided. That's not it. That cannot be sufficient, right? But if we were in a much better world than we clearly are at the moment, I would want that person to be able to change their mind and say, look, I looked at the issues. Now I've got access to all the information, and I can see now why it doesn't work. And it turns out, William, smart guy, you clearly think you're very clever. You haven't seen all this information, right? And when you take a look at all of the interconnected parts of this, when you make this your full-time job to actually understand this, turns out there's a bit more complexity to it than some ginger guy sat in his room yakking away on YouTube, right? Can really properly understand about this. So I want him to be able to do that. I think that would be, the problem is that when people do change their minds, at the moment, especially in politics, we're hugely suspicious of their motives, and they don't help themselves by never really explaining why they've changed their mind. It just looks like political flip-floppery, but that's why we get this narrative. It's why we get this idea that changing your mind is by definition a sign of a poor character, and that's not a healthy thing.
Yeah, I think the part about why they changed their mind would be where I would want to start investigating. If they change their mind for a bad reason, or an insufficient reason, I could see where it wouldn't be very favorable. But if they change their mind and it helped me change my mind for good reasons, then I think that I would definitely be in favor of that.
Yeah.
If they have information I don't have and they change their mind, I would want to elect somebody that would change their mind based on, sufficient evidence.
Right. And that's probably the difference here is that, in practice, we elect people. But also in practice, people elect their ideas. They're voting for their ideas, you know, and at least in the United States, when you vote, it says you could go to the voting booth and not know a single name, but you're going to see whether it's an R or a D. And then you're going to just, you know, depending on your party, check whoever you are. I would be surprised if anything close to a majority of people actually research any candidates before they get to the, you know, the poll booth, right? Like they're voting for that color, they're voting for that letter. And that's the tricky thing here. You know, again, it's a virtue to change your mind, generally speaking, but just wanted to kind of put that piece of conflict out there.
You're right. It's a really good point. I think one thing that's, you know, what we forget, there's this part of this idea that we're not really voting for the ideas. We're voting for a representative. That's what that this person represents us in this space, right? And so we shouldn't necessarily be voting on the person that says that they're going to do X, right? And then be angry at them if they don't do X. We should be voting for people that we feel that we can trust to make the right decisions once they have access to the available information. And that's just not what we do. Far too often, as you absolutely say, you vote for your team's color, and that's it, and you're done, right? Whoever it happens to be, you don't, you know, even know, you know, 90% of the time, you know, it's just ridiculous, and it's really concerning, because what that's meant is that we now have and this is turning into a politics show. I do apologize, but you know, we do have a system that now values and promotes people with dishonest agendas. And because persuasion becomes more important to politicians than honesty, and that's a really concerning thing. If we're virtualizing persuasion ability over honesty and trustworthiness, then you know, obviously we get what we get, right? And it's hardly perhaps surprising, one might argue. Anywho, I apologize. We'll roll off the politics hour. But David, I wanted to throw it over to you. Let's talk about SE for a hot minute on this SE relevance show.
Okay.
Let's talk about Street. So you wanted to talk about doing, excuse me, God, hay fever sucks, everybody. High degree of confidence, not willing to change my mind. You were going to talk about doing street epistemology with groups, right?
Yeah.
Sorry for the hard turn. That was a hard turn. I totally acknowledge that was a breakneck handbrake turn of a topic. But
yeah, no problem. I have this tendency of like always wanting to know what's next, like what's next in the community, what's next with how we do this thing called street epistemology. What's it going to look like in 10 years? You know, what's the next thing, and kind of trying to spearhead some of those ideas and experiments and testing things out to see how they work. And so backpacking off of this kind of hidden claim idea, an experiment that I've been working with, it kind of made me think about, you know, how else can this be used? How else can this strategy be used productively in my community or wherever? And it made me think of being able to utilize the hidden claim idea with doing SE with a group of people. So, and I haven't really thought too much about this. So you'll have to kind of forgive my kind of stumbling through this idea with you, but I kind of wanted to get your guys' feedback on this.
It's a great topic.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of at this point throwing noodles at the wall or whatever, but
has that proven effective in group conversation?
Yeah. But I guess I imagine having a group of people together, and I'm not sure the amount of people in the group, how much that would matter, but you're basically getting a group together, and you're going through the hidden claim process, where they're not really sharing the what part about their claim, and they may not even have to answer, but they would just kind of write down their answers. to themselves. So you would have them pick something that's meaningful to them, that they think is true, that they're fairly confident in, that would change their behavior if they found out they were mistaken about. A positive claim, it's typically easier to do this when they have a claim that is basically X is true instead of X is not true. You can also do it with like should or ought claims. And one thing that I've kind of this side tangent, I've had this idea of turning should or ought claims into truth claims by combining the claim with the main reason. So if you take the claim, people should be open-minded,
because
and you ask them what's the main reason, because it promotes empathy.
Right.
And so you can take that and combine those two things into a truth claim. Open-mindedness promotes empathy. So there's your X's true claim. So you take the positive claim, and then you ask the scale questions, like you can do the general question, like what percentage of your beliefs would you prefer to be accurate? Start there, and they don't have to answer, they can just write it down, their percentage. And then you go into the confidence scale of the claim itself. You know, how confident on a scale from 0 to 100 are you that this claim that you've got is true? And everybody's exploring their own claim that they wrote down. They're not all, focused on one person's claim. They're able to do a claim that they've got that's personal and meaningful to them. And you would have them write it down at the beginning so that the tendency for them to adjust what their claim is based on the exercise doesn't fluctuate, even though you would probably want them to fluctuate their claim if they have good reasons to. But as far as the exercise goes, it's best to just kind of write it down so it doesn't change. How much the conclusion affects their behavior, how much their main reason affects their confidence, the sufficiency of the reason to support other conclusions. You can do the outsider test, like what's the likelihood that somebody can use this reason to arrive at conclusions you think are false? How do we test this? Is there a way to tell if we were wrong about this? What would raise your confidence? What would lower your confidence? All of those things, the kind of basic questions that you want to focus on during an SE conversation. And then ask them at the end of that, like, have you moved at all, up or down? And then if somebody wants to volunteer, you could do this a couple of different ways. You could say, all right, let's find out who moved the most, and let's bring that claim so that we can all kind of talk about it. And then we go through the exercise again, knowing what the claim is, and going from there. Or you could just have somebody volunteer, if they want to share whatever claim they had and discuss it. And it's a way for you to teach SE at the same time, because you're teaching them the questions that we should be asking with any conclusion that we have, that we hold. And so you're kind of having them go through the exercise, but
change in reflection of the actual claim itself. The method is the same regardless of what the claim is, and I think that's a super important idea that this demonstrates, and I know is that the heart of your hidden claim experiments. And I think they've been awesome, and I think this definitely feels like a great extension to that. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was pretty much done. It's just a way of using that in a different environment. And the more people that are exploring this, the better, right? So if you can take one exercise and have 20 people exploring their claims that they have, you're just adding more reflection exponentially in that way. So
I like it.
I'm up for feedback, how to maybe make that better, more structured, or again, it's just kind of an experiment or idea at this point.
That's great. I think one thing that's interesting about so doing normal SE or the standard SE is hard with more than one person, and I think that's an interesting thing to notice, right? And so we might want to notice why you could have a SE conversation with more than one person. Whereas, maybe the current sort of street epistemology isn't great when there's two people there. And I think the key component is empathy. Like, I think a lot of street conversations rely upon you making an empathetic connection with the person you're speaking to, and actually really understanding their thought processes and reflecting on them and helping them notice things about their own processes, helping them reflect on them. Whereas this, I think it does the reflection part. I think it inspires the reflection, right? It inspires them to notice something about what they're claiming, but there's no empathy involved. Other than being uncivil, right? And maintaining a sense of rapport. There's probably not much rapport building either, right? And those are fairly powerful tenets in the principle of street epistemology. It's like rapport and empathy are pretty critical. So it's interesting, like, that you can, and this gets to the heart of something that I think is really important, is that street epistemology, and I know I've said this quite a few times. In fact, I think I've got a banner that defines my version of SE, and I think I whip it out at moments like this. So street epistemology is the act of respectfully encouraging others to honestly and critically reflect on the reasons why they believe what they believe. And to me, it's anything that achieves that goal, anything that does that, is doing street epistemology or achieving the goal of street epistemology. So I think you could, because one of the things about this method that you've described, David, is that you could do it with a survey, right? You could do it with somebody could just watch a YouTube video and it'd be doing it for them, and as long as they're actively participating in it, I think they're doing SE, right? That's quite an interesting thing. So I think, like, boiling it down to becoming that elegantly deliverable is really interesting.
Yeah, I've even kicked around the idea of just making a recording, just do an audio recording of a guided SE interview. Yeah. Where, somebody could say, I'm not really sure about this. And the record, they can hit play and have the questions asked to them that would inspire that reflection. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, like, you go to like a meditation group, and there's a person there that's kind of guiding you through the meditation, but you also have these pre-recorded guided meditation recordings that you can do whenever you want in your own space at home or whatever, and you just press play. It's not optimal by any means. I would prefer doing, classic or modern
human to
classic,
human empathetic.
Yeah. In person.
in person.
Yeah, in person. With me knowing the claim and everything, but this would be one way to maybe branch out more and have more people exploring the reasons, the quality of the reasons, or the sufficiency of the reasons, and the reliability of the methods they're using, like 20 of them at the same time.
Yeah. Do you have any reflections on this, Noah? How does this sound to you?
I was a little skeptical, and I'll forgive me, David, for not having done my homework on your videos, but the hidden claim SE and the group SE, I was a little skeptical about it, but as you were describing it, I'm realizing how powerful it could be. I mean, imagine if we raised enough money to put together a 30-second Super Bowl ad, where if we were managed to get it down to that amount of time. I mean, that could be really
genius. That is genius. Could you
But anyways,
imagine?
yeah, I do get the sense that that's very powerful, and if we can open up that intellectual door for people, because the hidden claim SE, similar to the group SE, the empathy element need not be there, and the empathy elements essentially, I mean, one of the only things preventing it from being deployed at scale, like a intellectual bomb on whoever has the misfortune of running
What
into
is
it.
with you and your violent imagery when describing this?
Yeah. Well, consider me a little bit pessimistic about it. I don't know. I think we were helplessly delivered into whatever beliefs we have. So in the same way that you might not want to get, hit with a bullet, you might not want to get hit with a well-reasoned argument against what you're saying. So forgive me on that. But I agree with you, David. I actually am going to, after this, watch your videos and see what you've done in this experiment. I'd love to see like a large scale longitudinal study comparing like classic argument tactics with, a hidden claim group SE or something like that. And see, what percentage confidence levels change. That would be a cool experiment for a sociologist to run or something. I'm optimistic now about that.
Yeah,
Cool.
I really love this stuff, and I think it's a great thing to think about, and I do think empathy is actually there. I don't think rapport and empathy are gone, even if you're not in the room, like, because rapport and empathy are baked into how you design the question, right? Like, I think if you're not empathetic with whatever the belief is, at least a little bit, you're going to create the question in such a way that it's disagreeable and people aren't going to want to engage with it, right? So I do think, I don't think we jettison rapport and empathy. I just think we're expressing it in a very different way. But yeah, that's awesome. I really love this idea. I really hope it grows and becomes
Just
a thing.
put some like nice spa music in the background, and that'll take care of everything.
That sounds good. That's awesome. Yeah, I love this idea. I'm really looking forward to seeing it grow. Do you have any plans to do a group, like trial this, and sort of construct this yet, or is it still in the early embryonic stages? That was a very poor choice of words under the circumstances.
I think I'm going to try it in Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is a pretty good laboratory for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So those of you that hang out with me there, stay tuned and maybe sign up to be in a room where we can experiment with this.
That sounds like a great place to do it. Yeah, definitely explore this. I definitely think this is I'm genuinely intrigued because if we can roll it out at scale, I love the idea of Noah's Super Bowl. If there is a way we can boil that down. I mean, like, the idea that you could reach more people, encourage more people to think, I think is just amazing. I mean, that's just a great idea.
Maybe we can get Snoop Dogg to ask the questions.
I'm in. I'm totally in. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. So, Noah, you wanted to talk about addressing relativists.
Yeah, and we talked about this briefly beforehand. I don't know if relativist is the most accurate word. I think that's where we are right now, is that it is. But I was watching Reed's videos yesterday from the top, and the most popular videos, at least, he seems to run into a lot of relativists. And by relativist, I mean people who would generally say something like, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, or your beliefs cause the world or create your reality. And I find this problematic. I'm sure most of the SE community would as well, because it seems to create a mental infrastructure in which you can believe whatever you want and it's impervious to outside, influences. And so this is what I'm looking for here, is an extension on the Tic-tac test, right? The Tic-tac test helpfully draws out this intuition that people may or may not have about, do you want
to explain what the Tic-tac test in case?
Okay, yeah. I apologize for that. So,
no, that's cool.
Tic-tac test, the SEer will, once they get a sense of whether or not the person might be a relativist, they'll usually have a box of candies or a Tic-tac box with them and say, there are an even or odd number of Tic-tacs or candies in this box. well, actually, I'm trying to perform it from memory. So and they would ask, what if I said that there were an even number and you said that there were an odd number, would one of us be right and one of us be wrong? And the surprising thing is that there are a lot of responders that say both would be true, or yours would be true for you and mine would be true for me. And then you say, okay, well, what if we counted them out and the number ended up being like 13, right? If you guys want to maybe extend upon this.
No, well, it's yeah, that's all right. So one of the things that's interesting is actually I tend to see a lot of the time when people do the tic-tac test, when you're encountering somebody that seems to be saying, as you say, it's true for me, like it's my truth, right? You have your truth and I have my truth, right? So it's true in my world. And then the street epistemologist, and I think Mark Solomon's just great at so well. He will say, there's an odd or even number of tic-tacs, and then one of the first questions he says, what's the right thing to believe in this moment? Do we know? Is it, would you say that you knew that it was one or the other? And normally they say no. They recognize that they don't know is the reasonable answer to start with. And then you can say, well, if I said that there was odd a number and you said that there was an even number, could we both be right? And they normally would recognize the fact that they can't both be right. And normally, even though a moment ago they were talking about relative truths, in this moment, they normally would recognize, actually, no, we can't both be right about that. Some people will try to do it. Some people will try and still say, well, maybe it's true for you and this is true for me and we've just got our truth. And then he will say, as you say, he'll spill them out and say, if we counted them and we knew what the answer was, would one of us then be true and the other one would be not true anymore? Mm-hmm. And then again, they recognize when confronted with information, with data, with evidence, then all of a sudden these otherwise true positions were no longer true. One of them would become false, and it's a great way to break down this sort of relative truth narrative.
Right. So I think the Tic-tac test is great because it starts from a very, everyone generally understands the definition of even and odd. I've seen some that try to avoid the question by saying we've made up what even and odd mean. And try to evade having to respond to that. Right. But
yeah, people go to great lengths to kind of try to wiggle themselves out of this kind of, it's either odd or even. Like I've heard some really interesting ways to kind of get around that. Like, numbers were created by men. So, that's a problem.
Numbers are sexist?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We should abandon odd and even in the first place. Like,
right.
Sure.
It's a really interesting adventure sometimes.
Sorry,
go ahead.
One real quick observation I just want to make here is that I suspect actually that a lot of the time when people offer this view, not the numbers are racist or sexist idea, but the view just that I've got my truth and you've got your truth, what they're really saying is, I think you're wrong, but I don't want to argue with you. Like I'm not gonna do anything about it. Like you have your view of the world, I've got my view. Like we can just both be right and just not have to talk about it. Like we don't have to challenge these ideas. I think that a lot of the time that's what they're really saying. I don't think they're really actually talking about like their world is truthfully different from your truth. That sometimes for sure.
Not sure.
Yeah, they don't want conflict.
I think that happens though quite often. I think they really do think that they don't share the same reality, right?
I think some people do. I've definitely heard some, but I wonder with them. So when people get into these conversations and they start to literally say things like, my reality might be different from your reality, when they start to explore that view, I feel like it's because they feel that they've committed to a chain of reasoning that this has to be a conclusion. And so I don't know that they really do believe that, but I just think that the conversation thus far has led them to recognize that either they say this in this moment, or they have to acknowledge that there's maybe external testing that should be being applied to this that is valid, that might not agree with their position. And this might be being dismissive, but I think a combination of it being, I don't want to argue with you, so let's just say you've got your ideas, I've got my ideas, let's go to our corners and not have to talk about it or not have a conflict. That's one view. And then the other view might be, look, I've been pushed into this position now where I literally have to argue that we're living in different realities so that I can hold my views without them having to be attacked by this evidentiary support that you're making or arguments you're making, right? Because my world is different. That is another way, but I don't know that there are many people that start out the conversation by believing that we're in different realities, because functionally that just doesn't work as a general day-to-day worldview, right? It just can't. And that's not to say people
I don't know. Maybe they've stuck out to me in a more exaggerated way.
Yeah, maybe I've just not seen the examples, but yeah. what have you
next
seen?
Time that happens, Noah, ask them if you both are living on the same planet and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, my thinking here is that if someone starts to resist the tic-tac, they're trying to avoid that. Worlds. They're trying to, wave it away. The problem is that the stakes aren't immediately clear. And so I've been trying to construct this, and I got this from somewhere, I can't remember quite where, but to use a thought experiment, and I this is what it is right now. So, a captain is about to go on a trading voyage, and he's docked his ship in the harbor, and the harbor master or the engineer inspects the boat and says the ship is not safe to sail. It's got all these safety concerns, and the captain, who has all this experience with the ship, he's been on many voyages, it's not failed him yet. He says, "She'll hold. She's a good ship. I trust it." And then 45 minutes into the voyage, it sinks. And the crew sadly perish. And the captain, is the only one that escapes on the lifeboat. Should we hold the captain accountable for the fact that his crew perished, even though he really did believe that the ship was fine? So this forces, in a sense, the relativist to acknowledge that there are real life consequences to what you believe, and that we do have to share a reality and hold people accountable in a way that's practical.
That's interesting. I like that. I would, because you could ask them initially as well, is there any way in which your world, the ship didn't sink? Mm-hmm. Or, is there any world where that isn't what that actually happened, and that in your world, the ship made it back and these people are alive, and that in my world, they died as a result of the captain just believing and not actually checking, right? Are our worlds that divergent? Could it be true that the boat made it ashore, and also simultaneously not true that the boat made it ashore? That would be one. And then I like the accountability question. That's really interesting, because we need to interact with each other, right? And I might need to or want to blame you for something that you've done, or hold you accountable for that, right? And it wouldn't be sufficient to me for you to say, "Oh, but in my reality, I did that thing." Forgotten it, right? That's not gonna and so I suspect that people don't maintain this real genuine position that we live in different realities.
If I said it's my truth or my reality that the wallet in your back pocket is mine, why would I be mistaken? Not would I be mistaken, but why would I be mistaken? And that's a real life example of, I would suspect that they would not agree.
They will likely have a very strong intuition about that.
I like that one, David, because it's very simple and it's short and it's easy to comprehend. I worry though that they wouldn't be able to empathize with it the same way as they would maybe with the captain, right? Because they'll know that you're probably being dishonest about your belief, but the captain, they might think, I can see how he really did believe that to be the case. And if they have, and usually to grant this, relativist thinking tends to be a lot more empathetic and conflict avoidant. And so playing the empathy card into your thought experiment would likely be more successful.
The advantage, though, of David's view is either they agree with you or you get their wallet. So that's a win-win right there. And that's what I mean about victory. You must destroy your enemy. If I've not made that clear at the beginning of this, destroy your enemy and take their wallet. That's how we do it in SE.
This is after you put on the armor, all the armor of SE, your breastplate and your sword and your helmet.
Yeah, right. We need to make them like a foil to the armor of God, like pick different parts of clothing you know, like the um, bulletproof vest of
Shield.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I like this. I think this is really good. I would definitely think about using that thought experiment if I ever came up with somebody who was genuinely seemed to. Because I do think that those two other precursor conversations that we had, that those two other views, I think, are still probably more likely than somebody genuinely hard believing in relative realities. I do think that it's more often than not an opportunity to avoid conflict. And expressed in a way that seems epistemologically unsound or ontologically unsound, but ultimately is just, you know, just avoiding conflict. And then the other thing is, I do think a lot of people they recognize that if they acknowledge this point, they're going to be in trouble, and they now have to address some of the points maybe that the conversation brought up earlier, and therefore they are going to deny it and walk away and trying to avoid it at all costs. So yeah.
How do we resolve any dispute if everybody's got their own reality?
I mean, how do you function in the world if you believe that of people, right? You just can't.
This reminds me of a video. I think it was abstract activist. I can't recall his name at the moment.
Nathan.
He did a video with someone at a festival. It's like an hour long. It was awesome. And she was a relativist in the absolute sense. And when he asked directly that question, and I know this is just one anecdote, right? But I have noticed this on a couple of other occasions. The answer is, let's just have conversations. We'll talk about it. We'll resolve conflict with conversations. Now, is there a defeater for that kind of thinking? Like, or is there a way to point out how that could be problematic? You know, it's nice to say, let's have conversations, but is there a way to the trolley problem for that kind of thinking? Like, what can you say to somebody who thinks that you can resolve, a priori facts with conversation, right?
Yeah. Why are conversations important?
But at the moment that if we genuinely did believe that we were all in our own relative realities, our own personal realities, then what would the point of the conversation be? I mean, it seems to negate. Right. It seems to, as in your views, your opinions, and your thoughts have all been grown in a totally different totally might be hyperbolic, but let's say a different reality, and any difference is going to lead to different conclusions for you. Does that mean everybody is right about everything, regardless of what they believe? Like, is that really what's being said? Is there anybody who holds a view that you disagree with, and how do you distinguish them being wrong from you being wrong? Like, why is it different for you than it might be for them? And how would you identify in them that they're wrong about their view? How would you say if they just said, well, this is just true in my reality? I mean, I think that's the sort of thing that can at least awaken the noticing that this isn't a useful move for their own interests. I do genuinely, and maybe this is just my lack of ability to empathize with it, because I really can't understand somebody genuinely holding this view. I know there are people that say they hold these views. There are lots of views that I think people wear almost like fashion items, they kind of like the way they feel, and they like to throw them around, and it just makes everything seem easy for them, or is fun to wield them. But I don't think they functionally use them in the world, right? Like you hear silly things like, everything's a matter of opinion, man. Like, facts are just opinions. And it's like, well, is it a matter of opinion that, if you walk out your window right now, you're going to fall 3 stories to your death, right? Is that a fact about the world? Is that something that we, it's just a perspective, and there's no actual bedrock truth to that? Or is it, a viable strategy to get to your ground floor faster? Our opinions come into conflict with reality, and whilst we don't know any de facto solid truths, not de facto, but foundational truths, we don't have access to actual reality, we do certainly seem to share the same reality, and sufficiently seem to share the same reality that we can make reasonable predictions about what people might do and how we should act best in the next moment. So yeah, I don't know, it's weird.
This is why I think it's so important to add the aspect of how this affects your behavior with these SE conversations. if it's not going to change your behavior, if you found out you were mistaken about this, do I really want to talk about it? Like, can we pick something that would affect your behavior? Because that's really how it affects the rest of us.
Yeah.
Your beliefs affect your behavior and how you vote and everything, and that's really what affects the rest of us, not just the fact that you believe it, how you act upon it. And to kind of add more answer to what I think you were asking, Noah, about, how would you address this response or this idea? And I think you can earn a lot of rapport points at the same time by asking, why is this important to you? And with the conversation question that you had is like, if they said, well, we just need to have conversations, the question I would ask is, why are conversations important to you? And just have them tell you, have them think about it and explore why that matters. And, just be open to hearing what they say. And a lot of times, if they're able to explain it to you, it might be the first time that they've ever heard themselves say what they think about it.
Yeah. What you just said, David, that pairs really nicely with what Will was just saying. Like, what's the point of having a conversation if your reality is whatever you want? If they say the resolution for conflict is to have a conversation, then at the very least that it's obvious at this point, these are conflicting ideas. Like, conversations matter. At the same time, they don't live in the same reality. That could potentially, that seems like that could be a way to, at the very least, point out some cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I do like your ship thought experiment also. I think
I can't remember where I got it. I want to say the Crash Course Philosophy YouTube channel.
Nice.
I watched those videos years ago, but
it's definitely one that I think also has interesting facets that you could ask different questions about, which I always like when thought experiments lead not just to one particular thought, but actually you can branch off into different places. I do want to call out this comment though, by the way. This is phenomenal. The neurotic builds a castle in the sky, the psychotic lives in it, and the psychiatrist collects rent. I don't know where that's come from, Stephen, but that has absolutely made my day. I love that so much. That's awesome. That is just fantastic. Thank you so much for that, man. Awesome. We've got two more topics, but I'm just going to go ahead and roll them into each other because I think they're very much related here. So we've got about half an hour-ish left on the clock. So I don't know if we're going to have all of the meat on this particular carcass, but I wanted to talk about what I'm sort of, this is not a term that's bandied around, right? But it's one in which I'm sort of just going to use loosely in this conversation to sort of designate these ideas, right? And so the idea is the difference between soft and hard SE. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. But we also want to tie this to David. I believe you went out and sort of did what I think you discovered. How did you phrase it? You were doing what was it you were doing for Peter Boghossian? Damage control. I think you phrased it, which I totally understand.
I mean, that's the only way that I can think about it right now because, well, I don't know how much context we want to give here, but.
As much as you like.
There was the reverse Q&A tour. Peter Boghossian went out with some street epistemologists and film crew and really high quality, awesome, editing and a lot of props for that. I think there's even like drone footage and stuff, which I know you're into.
It's a necessary tool for street epistemology. No conversation can happen unless you've got a drone. It's fine. My wife doesn't believe me either.
Find a friend with a drone. Yeah, find a friend with a drone and you're all set. But yeah, and a lot of the stuff is really great. I think that it does inspire reflection with the participants and with the people watching it possibly. There was a what's the right word? Not conflict or anyway, there was
altercation.
Altercation? Yeah. That happened at Portland State University. and you can go and look it up and check it out, that I don't think went very well. And it kind of, we found out that it probably damaged that community, the way that was conducted. And it wasn't really SE in the way that I think of it, mainly because he was bringing the claim and asking people to say how much they agreed with the claim.
If I could just jump in, because I think just a bit of context. So for anybody that's not familiar, Peter Boghossian is the father of the term street epistemology. He created this concept of the idea in its original form in the book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. Describes it as very much an anti-theistic and anti-religious narrative. Since doing that, he's kind of not really been a major component of the street epistemology community, and actually proponents like Anthony Magnabosco, whose YouTube channel was inspired by that initial idea that he found in that book. I think Anthony will say over the last 7 or 8 years now, he's very much changed what street epistemology is, and the version of street epistemology that's now understood and practiced by most people is very much not the street epistemology described by Peter Boghossian in that book. And yet, the origin is certainly there, and the sort of the elements of it are certainly there. Peter Boghossian also wrote a second book called How to Have Impossible Conversations with Graham Lindsay, and that book again sort of touches on street epistemology related ideas, but it isn't actually talking about SE specifically. And I think it's fair to say that both books have their issues. At the very least, both books have their challenges. So recently, watching Peter go out and sort of start to get back into the street epistemology thing, by his own admission, he's saying, he hasn't done this for so long, and he's trying to get back into it and try and figure it out again. This is him. I'm kind of curious, and I didn't really get a view whether or not he really felt that this was SE, but clearly the SE community felt that this was a great example of seeing the guy who created this idea to go out there and practice it. And we did an SE review show. James Lindsay, did I say Graham Lindsay? I always do that. Thank you, Gigi. I really appreciate that. I always get that wrong. James Lindsay, my apologies. But yeah, so he went out. He did this. These interviews that were billed as a reverse Q&A. It wasn't billed as street epistemology. But he went out and did this, and yeah, it certainly. I as part of somebody who was on the panel that reviewed that, I can say that we didn't feel like this was SE at all, and for many of the reasons you described. But then, as you say, it also went very badly at the back end. So you went back to that university with Nathan, I believe. Did you say? What did you discover that was what was the mood?
Well, some of the videos, if not all of them, have like a label of street epistemology or a tag of street epistemology in it.
That's true. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was a little bit concerned. But the weirdest part about this whole thing is that it's like we're basically telling the person that invented this thing that they're doing it wrong. And I kind of have weird thoughts about that, because it's like, well, who am I to tell the person that invented this that they're not doing it right? You know what I'm saying? And and so basically my goal. Go ahead.
No, as I said, I can certainly understand why. I don't think you would be wrong to do it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one thing to tell somebody that didn't come up with it that give them suggestions on how they could do it better, but we're talking about the person that coined the term and all that. So it just adds to more reasons why it was so weird. But basically, my goal was to show up at this place, at this university where this all happened 2 weeks prior, and give good examples of SE. I think one of the things that we can do to address bad examples of SE is to provide good examples of SE. And so my goal was to show up there in this place where this had just happened and give good examples of it and ask people what they want to talk about, what's important to them, and then go through an SE interview with them talking about whatever they want to share, instead of, coming up with the claim and then having them talk about it in that way. And we made it very welcoming. I've got this kind of indoor-outdoor blanket that I always take everywhere to kind of put on dirty picnic tables or dirty benches. That way they have a comfortable place to sit, make it very inviting. It was a sit-down situation, very relaxed, very chill, without, the pointed microphone everywhere, and just kind of give an example of what it has evolved into.
Yeah.
Because I had the feeling that a lot of people came away from that incident and attaching street epistemology to that. And I guess that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. And
Yeah, me too.
We met there. We had some good conversations. There was the secondary goal of maybe trying to have a conversation with people that had participated in the altercation, maybe find some people. We kind of set it up to where we'd kind of be there around the same time of day and week to maybe like patch things up and see where we can give a better example of this. And I think that it went really well. I would probably go back.
Did you speak to?
Yeah, I had a conversation that Nathan ended up joining with this guy named Matt, who I think was the kind of person that they were really looking for on that tour to talk to, because he was really clear about, I don't feel safe sharing my views here. I feel safe sharing my views, blocks away without me representing my school. I don't feel safe in this environment sharing my views, whatever the views are.
And was this the guy from the video? Did you say? Sorry, was it the same guy?
From no. So this person, he walked up as soon as they were having the altercation. He was asking people what was going on. Right. And he was told, well, this guy, referring to Dr.
Peter
Boghossian, this guy thinks there's only two genders. And so he's like, okay, well, I'm out of here, because this is not a safe place for me to be to share my views. So I'm gone. And so we talked to that person, and we got a lot of insight, basically what it's like being on campus these days, and how safe people are in sharing their views. And to be clear, I'm completely I completely support the awareness that Peter Boghossian is bringing to this audience of, hey, we've got a really big problem here if students don't feel free to share their ideas on a university campus. Like, it has to be there.
I completely agree with that. Like, and I think that was the goal foundationally, was to show the idea that people can't explore ideas openly in these spaces,
right.
Spaces that are specifically designed for you to go. You're going to go when you know the least, and you're going to encounter way more ideas. And if you can't be free to express and explore these ideas, that is incredibly damaging to the psychological and intellectual well-being of people. So yeah, this foundational idea of reasons to the motivation for doing it, or at least the stated motivation for doing it, I totally agree with, and I think it's an alarming thing if people don't feel that they can speak openly in a place like a university. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely support that.
Yeah.
And so we were able to talk to this guy about all that. And I also just wanted to kind of show up and maybe have some good SE conversations,
Right.
regardless of what had happened. And I was able to do that. I think one of the last uploads I had was talking to this gal about, and her topic that she wanted to talk about was mental wellness. And that conversation got interrupted by somebody who was clearly not mentally well, enters the plaza, and he's yelling to the top of his lungs and is just like, I don't know if he was on drugs or like, I have no idea. But we had to end the conversation because we got pretty uncomfortable with that. And it was just so ironic that the topic was mental wellness. So, fun. Portland's an interesting city. I'll just
It
say
certainly
that.
sounds it. Yeah. I think it's really good that you guys did that. Like that's such an amazing idea, like to try to go and sort of rebuild the reputation slightly of SE, I guess. I think I totally agree with this idea of going and trying to surface the idea that people aren't feeling comfortable to express that certain views on campus and explore certain views, and have the right to be wrong about something, and like learn to be better rather than feel like I can't even say this for fear that certain ideas can't be explored. It's such a dangerous narrative, and so that's 100% useful. But I do think that Peter wasn't doing SE by any modern SE standard, and I think that it's fine. If what Peter thought he was doing, if he really feels that that's actually super effective and is achieving his goals, that's great. Like it's fine. Like I'm not trying to negate his right to do it. I would say that what he was doing to me didn't seem very effective. That was the first thing I noticed about it. Like I just genuinely didn't think it was working, and I think most of the observation I had was that not only is this not SE, but it demonstrates why SE is actually more effective than this particular approach. Now, in response to that, there have been some suggestions that actually SE has become much more softer, like a soft version of SE. SE is less aggressively pursuing and challenging ideas, and is sort of a more softly approach. Now, I can sort of understand that intuition. I really do feel that that's like something that's definitely changed from, like, let's say, fire and brimstone Boghossian Old Testament SE to New Testament love and hugs and Jesus SE, and I think that there's a sort of very significant transition. But the question might be, what's motivated that transition? Like, if that transition has just been motivated by the fact that we shouldn't be having difficult and aggressive conversations, then that would be a bad reason, right? If that's just a de facto, bad thing, then and actually these other this sort of fire and brimstone SE is actually way more effective at challenging people's views and inspiring people to reflect and genuinely getting them to to come to better ideas about the world. Then we should be doing the old school SE, right? But then the question is that the reason? And have we softened SE not because it makes it nicer and more lovey-huggy, but have we softened SE because actually we've noticed that that's actually more effective? And I genuinely, my feeling on this is that the softer version of SE is more effective. Now, I know everybody in the audience and everybody here is going to say, well, feelings are not a great way to come to truth, right? So the question is, how do we validate these two different ways of doing it? It's super hard to test this, right? But I think my evidence that I would bring to this discussion would be the number of street epistemology conversations I've seen where aggression has resulted in a perception, in my view, of the interlocutor disengaging or stepping back or not. Whenever the street epistemologist has entered a mode of conversation that I would say is more akin to the old school SE, I've definitely noticed the interlocutor seemingly disengaged. Now, I can't say if later on they, in the shower the next day, have not reflected more honestly and openly as a result of that interrogation. So maybe it is more effective. I can't know that. But I can certainly see that the more softly approach seems to demonstrate efficacy in the moment. Like I think that there's plenty of YouTube videos out there where we could compare and contrast the efficacy of an individual conversation just purely in terms of how the interlocutor seems to be relating to and responding to the conversation. Now, it's not a good measure. I don't know if like the more aggressive conversations haven't been more effective in changing minds, but I do suspect the people that want the more aggressive conversation don't want it because it's beneficial to the interlocutor, the conversation proper. It's more entertaining, but their argument is going to be, but people watching this might be persuaded, it might be more convincing to the audience. Now it's become a debate. So I talk about the locus of the conversation, right? And to me, it's critically important that in an SE conversation, that the locus of the conversation, the center, the core, where the conversation is being had, should remain with the conversation partner, right? It's not about what you think, it's about what they think. It's not about how you reflect and feel about their ideas and mental models, it's about how they do that. And I think that if you do the fire and brimstone style SE, in order to persuade somebody that's not actually part of the conversation, but some third party that's watching it, I think you can justify the aggression. I think you can say all day that, yes, but this gets me an audience. Alex Jones gets an audience, right? Alex Jones doesn't get an audience, or didn't have an audience, because he was recognizing nuance and was open to arguments from the other side. Alex Jones got an audience because he was extraordinarily aggressive and polarizing. And so it gives you a dangerous license, in other words, I think, to pander to a perceived audience. So yeah, it's a real problem. It's a real challenge to say whether one type of SE or one approach of SE is more effective than another. And I'm interested to know, what you guys think to this, because to me, this is the difference between hard and soft SE. And it also, ironically, seemed to be a massive difference between what Peter was doing, which definitely felt that what Peter was doing was for the video. It wasn't for the benefit of the people he was talking to. He was playing for the video, I think. And I think that was a major part of why it didn't work. But yeah, how do you guys feel about this? Noah's not had a chance to jump in, so maybe I could throw over to
Noah. Go ahead, Noah.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to hear what you think.
Well, so I have conflicting feelings on this. You probably remember we had a conversation about precisely this topic a few weeks ago, and there's a lot to think about here. On one hand, I think that we don't want to draw negative press to such a small thing. That can people. I don't want for someone to not join the SE community because they associate it with some sort of negative behavior, or to not be willing to fly the SE flag because they think the perception is going to be mischaracterized. On the other hand, I think that we need to have both the hard and the soft sort of SE, because that's the only way we're going to be able to know what's more effective. My other intuitions here are, I want whatever the most effective thing to be the most effective thing, like whatever works best to show somebody the reasons for what they believe, that needs to be what it is. And we talked about this before, Will, like if there were some sort of drug or a rain dance that someone could perform and then it illuminated the reasons for why they believe what they should do, let's stop going to the streets and just start passing out this drug, because that's going to accomplish our goal more directly, right? Like, and defining the goal of what SE is it's an active conversation still, and it's hard to determine how we should approach this until we've figured out what the goal is. And I get the sense that in the SE community, we're not being perfectly honest about what our goal needs to be here. We can't say fairly that we're not looking for some form of change, right? We're looking for, at the very least, the change to be someone realizes why they believe what they believe. But that has implications. The reason why we care when we talk to relativists is because we vote and they vote, right? We have personal biases that just can't be easily removed. We live in the same society with other people. And so, I have conflicting feelings here. I think that there is room for hard and soft SE in this sense. Like there was a discussion in the SE server about how, in Plato's writings of Socrates, as he, matured and wrote his later books, he would start to really sort of guide the conversation to a particular conclusion. Whereas in the earlier works, they would sort of resolve at the end with no formal answers. And I think there's room for both. But at the same time, I don't want for negative attention to come. Also, the demographics of the SE community might be a sign of a particular problem. the demographics of the SE community are largely intellectually skeptics, and that's okay. But if the fact that there's only a few people of faith in the SE community is maybe a sign that what we're doing right now isn't the most effective thing. Because if we want to absorb a demographic that looks like the rest of the world that we live in, if SE is not as accessible to that group, that could be a problem. Maybe it's an intellectual, ideological difference, but maybe that's just the way it turned out, and there's no bias towards skepticism. And I recognize that there is skeptical bias in the approach of what we're doing, but I wish that the SE community was a little bit more. There were more people that didn't seem to always reflect similar views to each other. So I know that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, just thinking about where.
Sorry about that.
No, that's
diversity.
Great. Yeah. Let's talk about the diversity thing. I think it would be unreasonable to suggest that there's an idea like SE is not biased or doesn't have an agenda. That is not true. SE is biased and it does have an agenda, but the interesting thing is what is that bias and what is that agenda? Now to me, and this is just my opinion here, I don't speak for SE and I certainly don't know where there's the definitive authorized version of any of this stuff, right? So this is just my reflection on this. I think that the bias is a bias for critical thinking and rationalism, right? That's a definite bias, right? And that exists. And the objective is to try to encourage people to believe things for better reasons, right? That's my objective. I just want whatever it is that you believe, you should have better reasons for believing it. And if the thing you believe is belief for bad reasons, I want you to change it. Now, it may very well be that there just aren't good reasons right now, for example, to believe in the flat earth, right? And if that idea is true, it's going to be incredibly difficult to use critical thinking and rational ideas to try to encourage to get somebody to be more confident in the flat earth hypothesis. Mm-hmm. Now, I could be wrong about that. Somebody might have really great foundational reasons, and that when we have this conversation and they explore their reasons, they can become even more confident, right? And my goal isn't really to convince them that the flat earth is not the correct model of the earth. My goal is to make sure that they've looked at their reasons for whatever it is that they've believed and genuinely thought about it and genuinely got really good reasons for it and can support their level of confidence in this idea. And if in doing so, there's a bias in outcome. So the bias in outcome might be there are fewer flat earthers that are also street epistemologists, right? That's a very, I would say, likely outcome. And I don't think that's necessarily because there's a bias inherent in SE against this one particular group. It's more that there's a bias in SE for the kinds of thinking processes that would encourage you to be part of that group. And that's a huge difference, right? But it looks the same.
I know, and parsing out, making sure that that's the case is one of the things I'm concerned about, because
it's a great thing to be concerned about.
I get the intuition that you're right, but
no, I totally like that idea. We should be making sure that that's the case, and I think it's a really important concept. But yeah, I like that. Sorry,
David, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm convinced that the more SE somebody does, the more likely that they're gonna be more skeptical about other things. Like somebody who's done SE a lot, just doing the SE could probably cause them to be a more skeptical person in general. Mm-hmm. So that might speak to the demographics that you were talking about, as far as the SE community is full of skeptics. And I don't, obviously don't think that's a bad thing. But I think that, the more you do SE, the more skeptical you're probably gonna be, because you're gonna hear a bunch of reasons that you probably haven't even heard yet, just by talking to people. As far as the goals, goals is huge on my scope. Like, what are the goals here? And in the Boghossian thing, it's like, an argument could be made that if there's no hard SE, as you kind of named it, Will, then the views aren't going to be there, and so the exposure is not going to be there. And so if there's no aggressive SE that people are going to watch, the message of just SE is not going to be out there as much. So you could say, well, it has a lot of people looking at it, and if those people aren't watching, then
what's the point?
Then the exposure is going to go down. Like soft SE doesn't sell. You could say that,
but
it doesn't. It doesn't get
I agree.
views.
Yeah, I've said this before that SE is not necessarily a spectator sport, right? And that might be a challenge. But that's not a challenge for SE being effective. It's a challenge against it being effective in certain mediums, right? So it's a challenge with it maybe getting a lot of views on YouTube. But hey, look, turns out like Anthony's got fairly good views on YouTube, right? The main reason why the community exists is because of videos like Anthony's and Reed's and yourself and like this we're making this content, and none of us are doing the shock jock like crash and burn scorched earth SE, right? We're having the honest conversations, and we're trying to extend empathy, and I think like so we have a huge community of people that have responded to that idea. The most of the people that I interview on my channel, where I talk to them about how they got interested in street epistemology and having conversations like this, it's I promised Anthony I was going to do a supercut of this for him, because every single one of them is saying Anthony's videos. Every single one of them is saying Anthony's or Reed's videos. That's how I got into it. And occasionally a couple of others, but they're responding to this kind of SE. And I don't think Anthony's doing what we might describe as hard SE. He's definitely doing the kind of what we have come to now understand to be sort of the modern version of SE. And one thing I was just thinking about is like, how would we characterize the difference between hard and soft, right? And so my view of this might be saying something like hard SE is not so interested in maintaining rapport. Like hard SE would want just enough rapport to not have the person walk away, but isn't so interested in maintaining and functionally, increasing rapport beyond the utility of making sure that the person isn't leaving. And the other thing I think is different about hard SE is hard SE, I think, is much more about what it looks like rather than how effective it is with the person you're speaking to. I think that's a really big distinction with hard SE. I think hard SE would be something like it's performative, it's done for an audience, and I don't think that, I think if we were to talk to Peter, for example, I think he would have he went out to Portland University, microphone in hand, giving people the right to speak and taking it away from them with the power of a deity, and he brought his own claim, and he was challenging people, and it was doing all of this was done for the video. I don't think for a moment he would use anything like those same techniques if that was just a one-to-one conversation with somebody that didn't have an audience. Yeah. And so I think hard SE is very much about sort of the spectators and not the interlocutor, which is literally just the comment that just got posted.
That's funny.
I did not read that, but that was just like that's exactly what I would describe. I'd say the hard SE is very much that. And I really wanted to pull out this one other thing that you said earlier, Noah, which is this idea that there's a danger that if we're not careful, we will sacrifice the integrity, the honesty of the approach for the sake of having an impact in that moment. I think if SE has got a long-term future, I don't think it can take a sort of, I don't think it can take a sort of dismissive view of the rapport building stuff. I think it's going to be more effective in the long term if it builds a good reputation for being honest into conversation, an honest approach, and a pleasant approach, and not a confrontational or aggressive approach. I think in the short term that makes for fewer views perhaps, but in the long term I think that makes for a stronger movement. And I think that's why in my definition I necessarily baked into my, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on my definition, but it's why in my definition I baked in the concept of honestly engaging. To me, I'd say persuasion or being sort of aggressive is not honestly or respectful. As another thing that's baked into there, respectful and honestly, and you could maybe achieve some of these things whilst being a little bit leaning towards the harder SE. But I'd say that to me it's super important, not because maybe it's less effective in this one-on-one conversation that we're having in that moment, but it might be more effective in terms of the long-term reputation of street epistemology as an idea. And I think that burning that bridge is a very dangerous bridge to start burning, for the sake of one conversation or one video's audience. I would say that this is the road back down to debates and to arguments and dishonest tactics and rhetoric and persuasion over honest. I was going to say intercourse, but that's not what I meant. Honest discourse. That's the word I was looking for. But maybe both. Maybe depending on how well the conversation goes.
So,
I'm certainly guilty. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say that I'm certainly guilty of being in the soft camp for sure. But that's kind of just my personality too. This is one of the challenges I think is with the course that's being developed, is that everybody's got their own personality, and if we put certain ideas in a box and we don't let the person's personality kind of dictate how they practice it, that might be a bad idea. I think that if somebody is super aggressive and they're very passionate and they're used to debate and arguing and all this stuff, if they do SE in their own personality, that's a win. That's on the right track. One of my goals in my conversations is I want them to want to have another talk in the future. And I'm curious as to what you think about hard SE versus soft SE. Like, I think soft SE wants to have another conversation in the future, and I'm not sure that hard SE is really concerned with ever talking to them again. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that'd be a question I would have. Is that another way to categorize hard versus soft? Is if hard SEers, they don't care if they ever talk to this person ever again. They're getting the views. They're getting the audience. Yeah.
I think
that
that's
might
good.
be one way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think very much the idea is that if we burn this conversation, it will the fire will be more interesting to a lot of people, and therefore the message will reach, right? The light will get out, right? So but then you've burnt that conversation, and the person you've actually spoken to may, as you say, never want to speak to you again about it, right? So the question is, do we want to respect the individual that we're talking to, or do we want to present a show for an audience? And I think Alex Jones is down that road, right? And if you've got Alex Jones at the end of a road that you're thinking about, like, you really want to think about whether that's a road you want to go down. Like, I'm not sure, and that might be an argumentum ad absurdum, but Alex Jones is pretty fucking absurd. So there's, I just think, you might want to think about that. Noah, we're rapidly running out of time, but let's hear your thoughts, buddy.
Yeah. I have a optimistic thought, and I'll share it. And if you guys
I'll take an optimistic thought.
So, I get the sense that a lot of people are disgruntled with the polarization, right? In general, and one of the reasons you've asked people how they came across SE, but there's a step before that, and before they see Anthony's videos, and that's usually they come across the term street epistemology or Anthony on a different podcast, or Joe Rogan or whatever. I don't know. I think Joe Rogan made some reference to street epistemology at some point, but the people want to have better conversations more than, well, maybe not more, but at a surprisingly high rate.
Right.
And when they hear that there's this promise of a way to have conversations that's not incendiary, I think that attracts a lot of people. So if the street epistemology community can use the stages of large, heavyweights in the general, I don't want to use the term intellectual dark web, but like those group of people, if we can, obviously it's not going to fly on like Fox News or CNN, like you're probably not going to get a whole lot of traction there, but level these heavyweights, and you're going to bring in people who just want to see what a good conversation looks like, where somebody gets close to changing their mind or otherwise, altering their views in real time. I think that's going to, in the long run, be more effective than the, quick buck, extra 100,000 views on YouTube, harder approach. So that's my optimistic thought. What do you guys think?
I like it. I think you're right. But I'm thinking about this in terms of, I think there's a perception that these kinds of big boom, like scorched earth conversation style, YouTube videos are hugely effective because they get a huge number of views and the huge numbers of likes, and and so it feels like it's making progress. But one of the questions you might want to ask yourself is, are those people that are watching your videos and liking your content changing their minds at all? It's very likely that you're just preaching to a choir, in fact, and all you're really doing is galvanizing support for, X destroys Y type narratives, right? And the idea that actually that real opinions aren't really changed in this way, I don't think, or not very effectively. I think real opinions are changed by people, like I said earlier, at the dinner table or in the office, or walking on the bus on the way home with a friend. Real opinions are informed not by somebody with an agenda pushing their narrative, because people have gotten very sensitive to that. Maybe not sensitive enough, but certainly very sensitive to that. So real conversations are usually effective when they're honest, genuine, open, and as interested in what the other person thinks as the conclusion you may have yourself on this issue. And I think that's hard to do, but we can get better at it. And if there are more people, if everybody out there starts to take this approach more frequently and starts to have that conversation, with that better conversation, one a week, with somebody that and just have an open conversation, I think the world would feel like a less scary place for sure. And the secondary, I think the level of discourse will start to elevate, and I think we need things like this. And I do think there's a space for celebrities and people promoting these ideas. I think that is important, and it helps people recognize that there is this thing called SE, and that there is a way of having conversations that isn't dangerous. It's no use having the best method in the world of having great conversations, but then nobody ever finds out about it, right? Because the utility is a problem. But it can't, the increasing the awareness of it can't come at sacrificing the integrity. It just can't, because as I say, that road has Alex Jones at the end of it. So we're running out of time, unfortunately, but can I just make a couple of comments real quick? One, chat has been absolutely flipping phenomenal today. I've really loved chat. So many comments in there that I've been sort of eyeballing and wanted to call out to, but the conversation wasn't in that space. But thank you so much, everybody who participated in chat. It's been just flipping brilliant seeing you guys all have your conversations, and I really appreciate all the comments, and sorry that we couldn't call more of them out. But much more, perhaps, if such equivocation could be allowed. Noah, David, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really loved this episode. This has been one of my most favoritist episodes, because it's just been a really good, lively conversation about some really genuinely important things. So thank you so much, guys, for being part of this today and doing this on Friday. David, you've got lots of lovely videos out. That's Sound Epistemology. The link is already in the description, so do make sure you check out David's. I think I read somewhere that somebody mentioned that one of the links wasn't working, so I'll go and check, make sure those links are working, but the link will be in the description. I think I've just linked to our interview. I don't know why anybody would.
Yeah, it's okay.
They're welcome to do so. David, do you have any final thoughts or final words?
No, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Yeah, just I guess if you're interested in doing this in a more formal way, just reach out, and there's plenty of people that can offer advice, and yeah, so just do it. A licky boom boom down. No snow. That's not. No. Again, you're welcome.
Providing you don't mention snow, Noah. Final thoughts?
No. Thank you for it. I think the chat messages were coming in at the perfect speed and the perfect frequency, because I would not have been able to track the conversation and chat at the same time if it were any faster, and it would have been boring if it were any slower. So
it's been great. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for having us on, and it's good to see you again, Noah.
Yeah, nice to see you again, David.
Yeah, it's awesome to see both of you guys. Although I've noticed you've not said it was nice to see me, which I'm taking personal, taking very personal in this moment. So you just need to know that. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. It's been great. We'll be back next week. Really apologies for last week missing one, but hopefully we'll be back next week. I strongly suspect. But until next time, check out the links in the description, and we'll see you next Friday, hopefully. Bye-bye.